to this first video we are doing or recording between ClubAgtech Argentina and Agtech Inside in the United States, an organization developed by Aaron Magenheim, who made this interview possible. So thank you, Aaron. And hello, Seanna. I know you are working in a venture capital firm investing in food tech. Tell me, why have you decided to invest your time in this industry and in this place of the industry?
Yeah, so my background is actually in technology investment banking, but I grew up in agriculture. And 15 years ago, I never thought I'd have a chance for those two disciplines, those two worlds to come together. But over the course of the last 6 or 7 years, we've seen a lot of change in this sector. And I love being able to bring my background in technology, communications infrastructure, mobility, software to food and ag. And I think as you look at, we've seen studies that have been done that agriculture is still the least digitized sector of the whole global economy, yet food and ag represents 10 to 15% of the global GDP. And to me, that seems like just a huge opportunity to help producers be more productive, more sustainable, more efficient, and really to deal with the challenges of their local economies, their regional economies, the global economies. And to me, technology is a key catalyst for that. So in those ways and for those reasons, I always tell people I've found my calling. I'll spend the rest of my life doing this work, investing and advising companies in the space to help them through that process of digital transformation.
Tell me, one of the keys of this transformation is technology, but the other key regarding food is the customer. So can you tell us how technology did or changed customers?
Yeah, it's a really complicated question, I think, because I'll tell you, over the course of 2020, when we were all locked down and didn't have a chance to travel and we weren't working in the same ways, my partners and I really had a chance to go very, very deep into the food supply chain and food supply chain technology. And where I'd spent the majority of the first 6 or 7 years in my work really focused on farm tech, we started to look more at what technologies were being used, where the gaps were, where the needs were from the farm gate to the consumer. And I think that has been a really interesting learning journey for us, because we realized how much fragmentation there is, how many siloed operators and data sets there are. And kind of a long-winded way of answering your question, the consumer is very clearly telling the producers that they want more transparency, more information about where their food comes from. They want to understand animal welfare. They want to understand how their food is grown. And in order to do that, to provide the appropriate level of sort of information, we really need the systems to talk to each other. And so, pen and paper and sort of what historic past practice has been in somebody's mind and not in a digital form makes it very, very difficult to share that information through the supply chain. And so in addition to our kind of farm tech work and my excitement about that, we're spending a lot of time looking at those technologies that are enabling data to flow from the farm gate to the consumer. And to me, there's a huge white space there and a lot of need for innovation, collaboration, and partnership.
This month, Bill Gates launched his new book, and I don't know what happened in the United States, but here farmers get very upset with his opinion. And one of the questions is, do farmers in the state, do you know what happened with them, about their reaction? But most important, what role must farmers play in this new economy, in this new food industry?
Yeah. So it's an interesting, I have not read the book yet, but I will say that there was a lot of surprise, I think, on behalf of the food and ag community in the U.S., just how much land the Gates Foundation, how much farmland. The Gates Foundation is the largest farmland owner in the U.S., and I think that there were a lot of producers that were very surprised to learn that and had concerns about it, probably not unlike your Argentinian counterparts in your part of the world. And I think there's a lot to unpack there. And one of the things that I understand the Gates Foundation is focused on is regenerative agriculture. So how do you actually use livestock and grazing to sustain the land, and not just, it's not about sort of moving to only alternative proteins, sort of getting hyper focused on a part of the market that's just emerging and it's still a very small part of it. But how do we actually use the existing production agriculture practices and systems? How do we introduce new practices to create more of a regenerative food system? And I think there's a lot of possibility there with respect to the Gates Foundation and other sort of big landowners who are, again, not just about getting rid of production agriculture, but it's really about how to make it more sustainable. So I haven't read the book, but that's just a quick snapshot. To your question though about what do the farming community, how do ag producers kind of participate in this? I think for so long and for so many years, we really didn't care that much about transparency in our food system. We just wanted to get as many cheap calories to people who needed it as possible. And, producers were comfortable in that system, and they tend to be sort of independent in their culture and their practices anyway. And now that's changed in the last 5, 6, 7 years. As your previous question alluded, the consumer has gotten very, very focused, and buyers are very, very focused on understanding where, how things are grown and where their food's coming from. So I think rather than sort of running from it or shying away from it or being cynical about that, farmers have a tremendous opportunity to lean into it and to really sort of shift their thinking from being a price taker, right? We're very much a supply driven farm economy. We produce and we put it in the market, and the producer takes what they can get for it. It's a simplification, but for all intents and purposes, that's kind of how the farmers had to sort of behave economically for generations and generations. And now we have an opportunity to take this data that's being produced, take all of these sort of interesting technological things that are being done on the farm, and being able to farm more sustainably, and communicate that to the consumer. But the farmer has to be a part of that, and you can't just leave it up to the brands or the retailers to tell their story. I think those farmers that are going to be successful for generations and generations to come really have to play an active role where they haven't historically played an active role in communicating their stories to the market.
That's great. And I want to ask a couple more questions regarding, I don't know if you have this view, meat substitutes, plant-based or cell-based, are they the Uber of the farmers? And what are your projections regarding them?
Yeah, so alternative proteins are obviously getting a lot of attention globally, not just in the U.S., not just in Europe, but I think, look, there is a place in the market for alternative proteins, and it's a very high growth category. Do I believe over the midterm to long term that they will displace completely more conventional farming and production for proteins? No, I think there's a place in the market for them, and it's a growing niche, and it still has not kind of hit those. It will take time to hit those mainstream inflection points, but like anything, there's a place in the market for it. My interest, really, when I think about alternative proteins, is really on the processing and production side. So how are the food processors reacting to this opportunity? How are they creating more supply chains for specialty grains, for example, that are going into into some of these alternative proteins. How my interest is more around the supply chain element and how the supply chain reacts than really, producers being displaced by this, because I think that there's always going to be a role in the market for conventional protein production, and hopefully we continue to make improvements around, again, animal welfare that the consumer is very clearly telling us that they care about, and sustainable practices. And there's room for improvement there. There's always room for improvement. And I think that's, again, back to your previous question, the more the producers can tell the consumers how they're improving, the better they are, the more they're trusted. And I think that's kind of the important takeaway. And then, again, how are the food manufacturing, how are the consumer products companies designing their supply chains around these new proteins?
Well, Seanna, we know, or you expect to come to Argentina next year, so we hope to receive you with our products that are food tech. We have wine, we have meat, we have vegetables, so will be a pleasure to receive you with all of these stuffs.
It'll be a pleasure to enjoy all of those things.
Great, Seanna, thank you very much.